Okay, well, thanks so much for joining us this afternoon. I know that we're scheduled to go on, I think, until 3 o'clock. We've just got a couple of speakers to talk to, and then we're hoping to have a conversation and a discussion about the work. We will probably try and finish early by 2:30, rather than, we're certainly not going to carry on and string it out for as long as possible. So welcome everybody, and I'm just here to do some quick introductions. What we're going to be talking about today is obviously citizen science, and sorry, I'm in the in-between zone now where I can't see my slides or on the back. I just want to check, is there a way of having one big slide on the bottom here, because I've just got them quite small? That's better, super, thanks so much, thank you. So yeah, I'm just going to introduce the general kind of concept of citizen science and what we're trying to achieve, and then we've got a video from Simon talking about his experiences over the last 8 years of doing citizen science in the West Country. And then I'm going to hand over to my colleague Paul, who's going to talk specifically about a really exciting project that we're just starting off called CastCo, which is a big collaborative project and is the biggest citizen science national scale project that we've ever had in the UK, involving a lot of the UK water sector as well. And then we're going to hand over to Cecilia Young from Severn Rivers Trust, who's going to talk about what they're doing with a lot of the on-the-ground citizen science monitoring and some of the challenges. And then, of course, it wouldn't be a proper citizen science session if we didn't actually hear from a citizen scientist. So we're really grateful to have David Lowe, who's taken time out of his day job and has come to join us and talk about his experiences and motivation for volunteering. So that's what we've got lined up for you for the day, for the afternoon. And really, the reason that we're here is because we want to give out this invitation to come to the professionals in the sector, like yourselves, to come and join us and to come and support and help citizen scientists and to get involved with the kind of work that we at the Rivers Trust and with our member trusts and the other project partners in CastCo are getting involved in. And just to make sure that we're all on the same page, that we understand what we're talking about when we're talking about citizen scientists, is that it's essentially, the non-professionals who want to get involved voluntarily, either as individuals, groups, or through a network. And it's not just about data collection. I think a lot of us are really familiar with the concept of citizen scientists getting involved in contributing data and crowdsourcing new data and information, but it can be a lot more than that. And I think that that's what we'd like to achieve through our work, is not just having citizens involved in data collection, but also in terms of framing and articulating the problem. Why are we collecting data, as well as many of the solutions? So the current situation that the water sector finds itself in is pretty unhealthy for everyone. And as we've all been here for the last few weeks, most of us will have seen what was happening at the political party conferences, and it seemed to be a competition in water company bashing between the different political parties. First of all, we had the Conservatives saying, we're going to increase the fines from civil sanctions, not criminal prosecutions, civil sanctions, up to £250 million, which is a big leap, a 1,000-fold leap from what can currently be fined from a civil case. And then, the Labour Party on the other side saying, well, we're going to stop all bonuses and imprison water company bosses. So clearly there's a breakdown in the relationship at the moment between the formal water sector, water companies, and the rest of society, including the leaders of society and our political parties. And I think it was really well summarized in the Environmental Audit Committee report that earlier on this year said that we see this unhealthy situation, this current crisis, as a result of chronic underinvestment and multiple failures in governance and enforcement. And it might seem a bit strange, why am I kind of raising these issues at the start of a discussion about citizen science? But it's precisely because we feel that the role of the citizen is much bigger than just collecting data, that can be critical in helping to strengthen good governance within the sector and to actually help to turn this situation around. So our current situation is very much a crisis of trust and of confidence in particularly water companies, but also regulators, and sometimes even the charities like ourselves involved in the sector, to be doing the right thing. And we know that these are all the characteristics of good governance. So when we have accountability, when we have transparency, when we have effectiveness, etc., then we have strong legitimacy of the different actors within a particular sector. And at the moment, it's that very legitimacy that's called into question. And essentially, this social license to operate for many of us in the water sector is at a crisis point. So increasing participation, accountability, transparency, access to information in a broken system like this can be very, very powerful in terms of turning things around. The Rivers Trust has become quite well known for the sewage map that we produce, and that was a really important step in terms of injecting a new level of transparency about what's happening with sewage pollution from storm overflows into our rivers. This was a really important step in terms of democratizing the data. We already have this data available. It's not our data. This is, of course, Environment Agency data. But previously, it wasn't easy for people to access it and see what does that mean on their river? What does it mean for them and the areas that they would like to go and enjoy? So we've already had this very powerful experience of democratizing the data, but I don't think that that's going to take us far enough in terms of fixing the system once it's become more apparent what's going wrong and what's going on. The water sector is at the forefront of facing the two big kind of existential crises of our time, which are the climate crisis and the biodiversity crisis. So as we're seeing huge pressures coming as a result of loss of nature and the climate crisis starting to unfold, we know that the only way that we're going to build really robust and resilient solutions to those are if we're doing that together. And I think the drought that we've come through recently, and that the map on this slide shows that we've still got 11 areas that are still declared to be in drought, even though we've started returning to higher rainfall conditions. But drought is such a clear example where water companies and the formal water sector can't solve this problem alone. We need to absolutely rely on individuals and households to be part of that solution and reduce water consumption. And we can't do water demand management without individuals. So a lot of what we're trying to achieve in order to build better climate resilience for the future is trying to solve these two crises at the same time. If we can build nature-based solutions, and the whole call to kind of build back wetter as well as building back greener is so important that communities are involved in that as well. So nature-based solutions are inherently community-based solutions. And a big part of getting people involved in citizen science and at the sort of forefront of understanding their own river health and how that's monitored, how their information that they're generating is taken seriously as part of understanding the whole picture, helps to fundamentally shift the relationship of individuals in the bigger water sector. a future resilient water sector is going to need not just customers but active citizens who are excited to get out and measure, but also then prepared to get involved in building some of the solutions and being part of some of these solutions around water saving and regeneration. So just to kind of finish off, there's something that we don't often talk about when it comes to citizen science, is how the whole process of democratizing not just data acquisition but decision making is really critical in terms of building more resilience. We need to have a lot of diversity, stronger participation, even some redundancy in systems which are going to be resilient to the shocks we know that we're going to face. And this inclusivity is going to be critical in terms of regaining trust and confidence in a sector to get us through what we know is coming in the next couple of decades. So I'm going to hand over now to a video which is going to be running in a minute, but really this is our invitation to you guys to think about how can you be involved, and are you prepared to get involved and come and join the citizen scientists who are starting, who've already been really active around the country, but now starting to join together and form this national network, which is potentially a really revolutionary movement. So thank you, and I'm going to hand over for the video now. And this is my colleague Simon, who couldn't travel to be with us today, but has just recorded his presentation. Thanks.
Hello everyone, I'm Simon Browning, working for the Rivers Trust. Sorry I can't be there today, but I've recorded this presentation talking to you about what we've learned using volunteer monitoring over the several years in the West Country. So if I just share my screen, we'll get started. Myself, go into presentation mode. Okay, so a bit about me first off. As you can see, my name's Simon Browning. I've been working for the Rivers Trust for 6 months or so. Before that, I spent 7 years with West Country Rivers Trust. And one of the first things I did there, I was part of the sort of data and evidence team. One of the first projects I had on my doorstep, if you like, when I arrived, was to pick up the development of a volunteer monitoring scheme, citizen science scheme, if you like. We had, I think it was £10,000 from the Heritage Lottery Fund for a 6-month pilot project. So I'll tell you what we've learned about that. So initially, the project started, we actually based it on the Earthwatch freshwater watch system. But after, I think, 3 or 4 months of using that scheme, we thought, well, we can develop something that's a little bit better, a little bit more locally based, locally relevant. So we developed our own survey form. We looked around at what information was being collected by volunteers around the place and by the bodies. And we came up with a sort of a 2-sided survey form. Really easy to fill out. As you can see there, collecting information about plants, wildlife, river condition, barriers, all that kind of thing. It also includes some basic water quality tests for phosphate using Lamont test strips, for total dissolved solids, which we use a fairly low-cost probe, total dissolved solids and temperature, about £10 each, and then turbidity tube there you can see where which we build ourselves actually from a recipe, if you like, that was given to us from Thames 21, or actually was put in the catchment-based approach citizen science guide. So volunteers go out and they collect data and fill in that sheet, then they come back and input that data into Cartographer, which is an online system for recording the data. One of the really nice things about Cartographer is it includes some basic visualizations. So you can see there a map of all the points that have been collected, and they're colored in that case by total dissolved solids. So all the volunteers can see that data and they can do some basic interrogation of that data. So you can see here we've got average levels across the West Country, with the lower blue levels coming up on Dartmoor, and then as we move into the eastern sort of limestone geology, you get higher background levels. Some ones in there flag up. This is the River Inny, where there is a dairy processing factory that has been responsible for polluting the river there and was prosecuted recently. So then if I just shift myself out of the way a bit, then you can see once a year, if we have enough data in each water body, we develop these scorecards, which takes all that information and gives them a score based on the pollution, dissolved solids, suspended solids, the ecology, which is a summation of the invasive species spotted, mostly plants, and the wildlife spotted, and then the phosphate levels as well. Pollution is a result of things like sewage fungus, sewage-related litter, those kinds of things, cattle poaching. So that's the scheme, basically, how it works. We've got several, 300 or 400 people doing it at any one time, and over the last 6 years or so, there's been almost 1,000 people through the doors, I think, if you like. What we've noticed, one of the things we've learned, obviously, very quickly, is that actually to build robust, comprehensive data sets that will enable sort of environmental management decisions to be made can take a long time. It does take a long time. I think there's some evidence that with the best will in the world, that can take 7 or 8 years to develop. And I wouldn't say even in the West Country that we've had for the, well, certainly not for the last 7 years, we didn't start off with sufficient numbers of people collecting sufficient data to kind of really establish that baseline. But we're getting there now in some catchments with enough people out there collecting data regularly. But what we do know, and has really come to the fore through our experience in the last few years, is that the impact of getting people involved in citizen science in large numbers and regularly, and in a holistic kind of scheme that looks at the whole catchment picture or river processes, has lots of other benefits. This is a diagram from some work done by Izzy Bishop at Earthwatch at the time, I think, which kind of sets out that. And what we're really seeing is some of these impact pathways here. So almost working from the bottom to the top, being kind of the first and easiest to bring about is when individuals start taking part in volunteer monitoring their rivers, understanding what is impacting negatively their rivers. They're much more likely to undertake those kind of positive behaviours themselves. So they understand about water resources, about not flushing wet wipes down the toilet and all that kind of thing. And then as you move up the scale, we start to get groups coming together to write to their MPs, to post on Facebook about what they're seeing, and start to take action as a community more. We're starting to see then those community groups and the influence they have and the noise they're making, if you like, at local level, starting to influence the behaviour of larger institutions, and which might be the water companies, which might be local councils, or county councils, and certainly perhaps starting to get noticed by the Environment Agency. Some examples here, just quickly rush through these. So this is a group in East Devon. That guy there is Richard Ford, who you may remember back in June. This was a big by-election because it had been held by the Conservative Party for many, many years. So, this group got their local MP candidate down and was showing them the ropes and talking to them about river issues. He won that election in a massive sort of swing. We also see groups that come together promoting messages around. So this is in particular a call to arms to kind of get involved with the government's consultation on sewage spills, a call put out by the Rivers Trust, but that's magnified by these groups who have come to this information via getting involved in volunteer monitoring. This is the same group actually down on the River Otter, called the Eager Beavers, but this time they've got their local county councillor and a member of the Youth Parliament down, and they're showing them, talking to them about a range of issues, but certainly including pollution to rivers and how they can help by monitoring. This is a YouTube video put up by a group at Lyme Regis, or in the River Lym, called Turn Lyme Green. So these are pre-existing environmentally focused groups who are getting together, rallying around their river issues, and they've brought Jenny Jones down, Baroness Jenny Jones, so Green Party peer, and they've made a video. You can check that out on YouTube about the issues. They mention their monitoring in there. So they're really starting to gather their own evidence that brings them to the table with the water company and the regulator to talk in an informed way about what's going on and what they can do about it. Again, another recent article where a group down at Calstock this time have got involved with West Country CSI, picked up some alarming phosphate results coming out of sewage treatment works, and started then to delve into, and this is a picture of the Rivers Trust sewage map, looking at what that tells them around their area. And if you read that article, it's an astonishing amount. 20,000 hours, I think, of sewage was spilt into the estuary there from 8 different CSOs and sewage works in 1 year, with not a single environmental agency monitoring point to be seen. And so this kind of thing really fires up communities, not only to kind of push, and the parish council in Calstock have a meeting with the environmental agency and the water company to kind of talk about how they can, get some resolution to this and really sort of hold them to account. And then finally, another way things are moving on is that, again, another group this time, also in East Severn, they've arranged a visit. So they're talking to the water company, and they've arranged a visit to the sewage treatment works. So it's not just kind of people banging a drum and making a load of noise, but they're actually getting informed and involved and having meaningful dialogue with the water companies as well. So what we've learned then, some of the big changes that we made over the years, so the data people collect is pretty much the same as it started out as. There's just been a few minor tweaks to that. But what we really noticed, and it was around the time of the COVID lockdowns, was that actually where we initially just said, go and find a river near to you and monitor as and when you see fit, actually people really benefit from a more structured approach. So now we start to recommend a monitoring point that might be based on the Environment Agency monitoring network, and then we infill that with much more higher resolution points. But if we tell them this is where we want you to go, and we want you to go there monthly and collect the data regularly, then people seem to really respond to that and understand. And of course, it makes the data much more easy and much more valuable to use. We've also, so it wasn't something we looked at the beginning very much, but we're really beginning to notice now that quality assurance is really important. These are fairly low-cost methods, and although they are reliable to a certain extent, we also are learning much more about the ways they can go wrong or the ways people can misinterpret them. So starting to look at quality assurance procedures that document, even if they're quite light touch quality assurance methods, documenting those, making sure everyone is abiding by those, is going to be really important for providing a data of a consistent known quality. It might not be top notch, it might not be, well, it won't be equivalent to Environment Agency lab samples, but if we understand that data is collected consistently and to a known kind of level of quality, that's really important in being able to understand what we can use it for. And then don't underestimate the importance of supporting volunteers. I think is something at West Country Rivers Trust, the role of kind of coordinating volunteers initially was being carried out by myself and some of the other staff, but mostly kind of scientists, water quality experts. And what we've learned now is where we have environmental groups getting involved, that can really benefit because those support structures are much closer to home. And now I think West Country have taken on a volunteer coordinator who will be full-time on that role. So that will make a big difference as well in kind of attracting and retaining the numbers of people we need. Just a couple of points about what we've got planned next. There's still loads of room. We've got 400 people sampling in the West Country, probably to get the kind of coverage we want. We're looking at maybe 10 times that, so there's still plenty to do. And one of the things we're looking at, certainly through the Casco project, is other ways of getting people involved. Those kind of lighter touch, big river watch type programs, leading into something a bit more involved like CSI, and that in turn can lead into even more involvement like Riverfly or extended Riverfly. So there's kind of, there's a volunteer journey that we can kind of take people through. We're also looking, we know that, we've criticised the Environment Agency for years and years for the kind of the spot monitoring. We know that that's not the ideal answer, but and we're looking at developing low-cost sensor networks that can be owned and kind of maintained by the community. So these community groups are made up of riparian landowners, they know each other very well. So the deployment and maintenance of low-cost sensors starts to become something that could be achieved sensibly by a community itself. And then finally, for now, we're looking at continually extending and expanding the amount of test methods and the validity, if you like, of the different methods that people can use. So we're already looking at E. coli and topicoliforms for some areas, looking at bathing water monitoring and bathing water's designation. And then we might look at more citizen sampling, so where the volunteers collect the samples, but they're still sent away for analysis for things like eDNA and antimicrobial resistance, so sort of emerging issues. And in time, hopefully, with an expanded and increased market for kind of community-led volunteer monitoring techniques. We hope that we'll stimulate some innovations in that field. Thank you very much. That's all from me for now. There's my email address there and my phone number. Please get in touch if you've got any questions. Thank you.
Thanks very much. We'll do, can you hear okay? Is that better? Thanks. Yeah, so we'll do questions at the end of all the talks. So my name's Paul Hulme, I work for the Rivers Trust, and I'm going to tell you something about this Casco project, which I'm working on. As you've heard from Simon, and we'll hear from Cecilia and Dave, we already obviously have citizen science groups working across this country doing brilliant work. But the Casco project is really about trying to bring that together into a sort of into a national framework. So joining together, and as Christine said, you know, we're asking people to come and join us here today. So it's a 3-year Ofwat funded innovation project, which is interesting. So it's very much about testing ideas out and seeing what works and what doesn't. In a set of demonstration catchments, originally 8, but already it's moved up to 10 because some other people have come on board. And we're aiming to do the following 3 things. So agree a national framework of standard approaches for people to gather and share reliable data. So from simple wildlife sightings right the way through to, as Simon said, to eDNA. Supporting and training people on how to do this and how to interpret the data, really importantly, how to interpret the data collaboratively with our partners on this, the water companies and the agency, because that will allow us to make better decisions. So working with people in the industry, the authorities and communities to make sure that this data really does guide decisions. And so the ultimate aim, obviously, is to improve the health of our river catchments. So it's agreeing a framework, training and supporting people, and then working collaboratively with all the other partners in the sector to improve the health of our rivers. In the next few minutes, I'm going to flick through a little story which tells you where we came from with Casco and where we're going, and sort of what's prompted it, really. So just a bunch of pictures which I will talk to. Right now, our rivers are in a sorry state. They're polluted, and we know that they're depleted, flow depletion, and they've experienced a staggering loss of wildlife and habitats. But we know that if they were healthier, they could be arteries for the recovery of not only our rivers and our catchments, but our countryside. And so, all of us, I'm sure we want healthy rivers which we can use them safely, we can play in, we can relax in, and get in touch with nature. And that means that we've got to start empowering people who are already doing stuff or who want to do stuff, such as community groups and parish councils. There are farmers groups and schools. You'll hear a bit more about that in a minute. These are all citizen scientists. Citizen scientists are not just a narrow sector of volunteers. Any of these people can be citizen scientists who want to be part of making healthy rivers a reality in this country. And that includes, obviously, monitoring the river's health. But right now, where we are with the groups that exist, there's no way for the data that people collect to be trusted by government or shared more widely. So that's something that this project is about. It's about trying to make sure there is a standard that when we agree with the Environment Agency and with the water companies that if we collect data to a certain standard, they will accept it. We've got that agreement, but that's what we're working towards across the whole country. And we want to avoid this situation where the hard work of volunteers cannot be taken credibly or nor reliably. Okay, so we know that people care about their rivers, and they want to play an active role in checking on their health, understanding the problems, tracking down polluters. This is 500 people in Port Meadows in January this year protesting against sewage pollution in the Thames. And we know that people are often in the right place at the right time to gather valuable information. And more importantly, they want to be part of the solution. They want to be taking action. So there's this whole logic of that desire, getting involved with collecting data and getting to know their rivers, interpreting the data, and then using it as part of action. It's those three things that we think that citizen scientists can offer, and if it's coordinated, it'll be much more powerful. So CASCO is the first national project. So it's not the first citizen science project by any means, but it's the first national project. So that's why Christine said it's the biggest. It's a national project that will enable citizen science to collect credible data according to agreed methods, to share it with the government and the water sector and other members of the community, to help build that better picture of the state of our rivers and shared understanding of what's causing pollution and harm. And with that trusted data, volunteers can have more impact, as Simon was saying. We can hold polluters to account. And we can show businesses, communities, authorities what actions are working and what actions aren't. So this project, the CASCO project, it will test citizen science methods across the country in these 10 demonstration catchments. And we're working collaboratively, I said, with water companies, environmental NGOs. We've got the Wildlife Trust, Rivers Trust, and we've got some local conservation groups, the Environment Agency, some specialist advisors from different organisations, CEH, Zoological Society for London, FBA, Earthwatch, and River Restoration Centre. And then each demo has the budget with these partners to develop a collaborative monitoring plan, and that's really important. That I'm going to my first session with the river team near Ludlow on Monday, where the agency, the Environment Agency, the Severn Rivers Trust, and the water company, Severn Trent, are getting together to talk about their ideas about collaborative monitoring. What data have they already got that focuses on the issues in the river team, and what could volunteers usefully go and collect that would complement that and fill in the gaps? So it's very much about this collaborative approach, not just going off and doing it separately, but trying to work collaboratively so that together we really do milk more out of our data and we're able to make better decisions. So a collaborative monitoring plan will be developed over the next 3 years in this project for each of those catchments, which will feed into the local CABA partnership management plan for the actions. So that's really, really important. Then down here, every demo will be able to employ a paid volunteer coordinator. There's budget for that. The whole budget for the whole project is about 7 million. The citizen science part of it is about 2.7 million. They'll be able to buy monitoring equipment, training and technical support, and participate in this co-designing of this national framework. So there's the local issue of their collaborative monitoring plan and working locally, and then there's what they learn about what works and what doesn't being passed to the national team to look at how this can be used to spread this throughout the country in the future. And importantly, the Environment Agency have got budget and have started putting adverts out to employ one citizen science role in every demonstration catchment. So there'll be 8 new people in the Environment Agency to focus on citizen science. So that's their contribution. So it will be a forerunner of a citizen science data collective across the whole country. And that's really an important part of the country's water sector in the future. So the partners are really working towards a position where the efforts of citizen science are valued and welcomed and used in the decision-making process. So this is really critical for better participation and transparency in our water industry, because it will build our understanding about the problems we face and what to do about them, and which solutions are working and which aren't. And so by 2030, we're aiming for these things: volunteer scientists in every water body. You know, this is beyond the 3 years of Casco. The Casco 3 year is the seed corn money, but this is where we're trying to head. Hundreds of local groups, trained to a high standard, and diversity of funding, so secured funding. So, thank you.
I'm a bit shorter, so I'll just put that down. So, hello, I'm Cecilia. I'm from Severn Rivers Trust, and I'm a river restoration officer, which means I have a little catchment. It's a tributary of the Severn that flows into the Severn near Shrewsbury. And what I was going to cover today is a bit about why I want citizen sciences working for me, what particular project I'm doing, and then touch briefly on some work some of my colleagues do with schools. So why would I want citizen science to come and get data on my project? At the most basic front, I can't afford it any other way. I come from a background of environmental consultancy. For about 15 years, I worked as a consultant for a water company on their Restoring Sustainable Abstraction program, and it was all about the data. They spent a lot of money gathering macroinvertebrate data, flow data, groundwater level data, rainfall data, to build together an understanding of the problems in the catchment and identify the solution. I now work for a charity, and I get small grants to help landowners with measures like digging wetlands, enhancing biodiversity, fencing off watercourses. And altogether, they contribute to improving the river, which is the end objective of my funding. But I haven't got any data to show this, because I can't afford it out of these grants. So if I can get volunteers, local volunteers, to start engaging and to help collect some data, this is useful both to understand existing pressures, hopefully to measure improvements in the water quality, but also to provide some sort of evidence to funders, to attract more funders, saying these things we're doing are actually helping. And it's also a brilliant way of engaging with the local community, because they start to understand what we're doing, and they've all got lots of friends, so they go and tell their friends about it. And it was fantastic last weekend. I had one of my volunteers out doing the proper stuff. We've been training, and they're doing the proper, and she said she's now had the confidence to tell her friends what she's doing, and she's taken her certificate of accreditation into work to show it off to everybody, and that's what it's about. So I thought very briefly I'd just touch on where my volunteers come from. I've got 13, which I've recruited from a variety of sources. A few had some relevant background, so I've got a couple of water company rangers who've added it into their job role. It wasn't what they were required to do. I've got a volunteer from a water company and the Environment Agency who are actually, they have an ecological background, but they're doing it on their days off because they want to get on hands-on in their local river. But the others I've got 7 who have absolutely no background. I've got 2 who like litter picking in the nature reserve that the river, and they wanted to learn more about it. I've got a local landowner who's passionate about what he can do to improve the environment. I've got the father of a friend of mine who wanted to plant trees, but I haven't got any trees for him to plant at the minute, so he's learnt to do the project that I've got. So they're from all walks of life, but they're all keen about learning more. And they didn't, to be honest, they had no idea what they were signing up for, and it's been quite a bumpy ride. You know, for me, it was plunging into the deep end because I didn't really know what I was getting them to sign up for. And as I said, right at the end, I'm just going to touch on a bit of school stuff. So what I'm doing in the Ray catchment is a Smart Rivers Hub. So this is something that's organised by Wild Fish, who were formerly salmon and trout conservation. And the aim is to collect long-term macroinvertebrate data. So that's the little creatures that live in the river. And because they will give us an indication of what the pressures are in terms of flow, water quality, sediment in the river. Now, you may have heard of riverfly, which has been going on for quite a long time, which is similar, but they collect a sample of creatures from the riverbed. They look at it in a bucket of water on the bank, and they kind of count how many mayflies and stoneflies, and that will give them some understanding of the water quality and the flow pressures. Smart Rivers is also known as River Fly Plus because it's taking it down to species level. Now, I'm not a biologist, but that's basically as low as you can go. So you're working out whether it's this mayfly or that mayfly, because this one is tolerant of this condition, and that one is tolerant of something else. So it's taking it right down to a much more detailed level. What we do is they collect macroinvertebrate samples twice a year in the autumn and the spring. They get in the river and they kick the bed and they collect what's in the net. And you do it twice a year because they will have different life cycles and they will also respond to different pressures in the summer and the winter. It's set up by wild fish, and they definitely don't just get you going and leave you in the lurch. So they train our volunteers. It was a 2-day training thing, which I'll come back to, but for me, it was like, whoa, that's actually quite difficult. This is the sort of thing in my old job we actually paid people, professionals, to do. And that does lead on to a question of how good are they, which I'll come back to in a minute. But once they've done the training, they then support you. They do benchmarking. So they will take the first autumn and the first spring sample, they will analyse it, and they will tell you what your expected species are. And then they give you identification cards, and I'll cover one of those again. So that it brings you down to, are you looking at those 2 dots there, or you're looking at those 3 dots there to tell you whether it's this one or that one. They also provide a lot of support in terms of when you're looking down the micro, because you take the sample out in the field, then you take it back to the lab. You preserve it in alcohol, or you pickle it, as my colleague says. You take it back to the lab and you look down the microscope. But if you don't know what it is and you've gone through all your lists and you still can't work it out, you can take a photograph and send it off to them, and they will come back and tell you what it is. They also give you the option, if I've got 5 locations, we're going to work through, analyse them, we collected them last week. If we get to the end of the 3rd and my volunteers, because it's their first go, are going, I can't do this anymore, I can actually pay to send the last 2 off. I've saved enough budget to get it analysed professionally, just to give us a bit of a boost to going on. But the important thing is they QA 1 sample every season. So of my 5, I will have to send one off to wild fish, and they will have a look at what they find. We'll give them what we thought we found, and they will tell us what they thought they found. What we do if it's massively different, I don't know. I guess it puts a caveat on the data. We are at the early stages. As I say, we took our first sample last week, and we're just going to start scheduling in times for them to come in and look at it. So just the last point I was making on here is, whilst we're using volunteers, it's not completely free. It has cost money to set it up, so I put the costs on that. And this is where I see the link between citizen science and local businesses and organisations. I funded this. I normally work with grants to work with landowners, but I had some community engagement money that came on the back of a pollution fine for a company in Shropshire, came to us to do some community engagement, and we used the capital part of it to fund this. But I have no more money to fund another one. And it would be fantastic if local organisations went, well, you know what, it's not a massive outlay. If we can fund the startup bit, then they can take it forward to gather data. And the reason, just going back to why we're doing macroinvertebrates in particular, is they kind of reflect the average conditions. They live in the river, and they will respond to the sort of general conditions of it, whether that's low flows, high flows, fast flowing, whether there's fine sediment input. They will respond to that, whereas if you were going to go for a spot water quality sample, that gives you the water quality at that moment, or even a time series, maybe once a week water quality. This will reflect the last sort of 6 months of life in the river, so it's a different data set and a very good one. The data we collect, we put into Cartographer, which I think Simon referred to before, so it's all available, and I'll show you one of the results things in a minute. Just a few photographs from the training. So they went in the river. It's 2 days. They spent half a day learning how to sample. And it sounds easy, you just scoop it up, but you don't. You do it in a very specific way, so it is repeatable. Because that's the point of data, is it has to be repeatable. And my volunteers are now divided up. They each own one of their sites, so it will be the same pair or 3 going back to take it, so they know exactly which bit of the river. And you divide it up, and it's timed, and it's very specific. You then have to wash the sample, and this is really tricky. You have to separate all the creatures out, and bearing in mind mayflies and stoneflies maybe a centimetre, or even caddis 2 centimetres. A lot of the true flies are like a 0.5 centimetre bit of your hair. They're that small. So it is a very onerous task. And then you go through one by one, and I've got a photograph up there of, I think it was a cased caddis that had come out of its case, and that's what you're looking, each one in turn. So it is hard compared to many of these other things. But as I say, we're very supported by wild fish, and this is the, oops, that didn't work. My button's not working. Oh, there we go. This is what they give us to help. So for every species they expect us to find, they will give us an image zoomed in, pointing at the key things you're looking at. So my volunteers have learnt, whilst they don't know what everyone looks like, they've learnt how to use these keys to look down the microscope and go, yes, I can see that hair, it's one of these. And as I say, we've got options if we still can't work out otherwise of sending it off. So just very briefly, we'll look at the results. You put them all into the system, and you probably can't see the detail in there, but it's showing that this particular one actually is moderately impacted for chemical pressure and sediment pressure, but it's only slightly impacted for other things. Over time, you'll get actually a time series of this data, and it will build up. That's just from our first benchmarking. But it's a list of everything we found, and that data in itself could be used by other scientists to interpret other things. So it's a really good data set that we're building up, assuming that we're actually identifying them correctly. So just very briefly, I'm just going to touch on a little bit of what one of my colleagues is doing. He's doing very similar with schools, but at a much lower level, but it's still citizen science. So they go out, the kids scoop up their bucket of creatures, and they just look for these specific species which all have a tolerance score. And by counting how many of each one's up, they can actually work out their own little pressure. And it's very similar what we're doing at a lower level, but the point is the school is doing it time and time again. So these are the citizen scientists of the future, both in terms of what they're doing now and the data they're building, and hopefully the interest. And one of the main reasons I had to show this is the kids came up with a name for their tools. So they squirt up their creatures with what we might know as a turkey baster or a pooter, and it's a Harry Pooter, and they put it in the sorting hat tray to sort them all out. So that was really what I wanted to say, but just to sort of kind of convey my overall enthusiasm for this. I've actually started volunteering myself. I don't live in the Severn catchment, I live in the Welsh Dee, so I, a few weeks ago, signed up to be a volunteer for their programmes because I think it is the way forward. We can't afford to get all this data, and a lot of the projects we're working, there is so much out there, and it's just, as Paul has been referring to, how to harness it and how to make people accept that it's real data. And that's it. So I'm going to hand over to one of my volunteers. Hopefully he's going to say he's enjoying it, but I don't know what he's saying.
Thank you. This is very much out of my comfort zone, so apologies if I read a script or drone off. My name is David Lowe, as you've heard. My day job is construction consultancy, so if you want to talk to me about collaborative forms of contract, public procurement, social value act, I am your man. However, today they won't let me talk about those, so I'd like to talk to you about why I like to volunteer to do this, to stand in rivers. It is very glamorous. Obviously, this is last week's episode with Cecilia. This is the easy bit. This is followed, as you've heard, by the scraping through samples, examining this, examining that, trying to work out the difference between all the different types of caddisflies. But what I was asked here to do today is to explain why I want to do this, why I take time off my day job, which is busy enough anyway, to be fair, to stand in rivers. It's not just about the glamour, the exotic lifestyle that this brings. It is about doing something different. Now, nowadays, everybody has a journey, and I think today I have to tell you a little bit of mine, just so you appreciate why I do what I do. So, for the last 15 years, pretty much every day I have walked my dog. And I've walked my dog on a river, along the river, through farmland, arable, pastures, and I've used that walk to get away from work. It's all, social value act, it's so exciting, but I need to get away. Climate change is depressing. I need to get away from things. So I've used that walk. And I've walked along the Brook, the brook that we've seen me standing in now. And I've thought about things, and I've pondered it. And I've pondered and I've pondered. I've got depressed about things, and I've thought there's better ways to do things, and I've done all the things that most people probably do at some point in time. But also, I've pondered over my neighbour who farms a mile of the Brook, who likes to cut down all the trees he can find and get rid of the ponds and get rid of the hedges. He may have had some episode when he was younger, maybe some kind of traumatic experience with a hedge, but whatever it is, his influence in life is to get rid of all the habitats he can find and create a flat monoculture. And that upsets me a little bit. But on my walks, I find myself getting distracted. And on my walks, I can see things. So far, in the last couple of years, I've seen things like egrets, herons, kingfishers, otters, trout, all things that just capture my eye. And I realised that little bit of wildlife was the bit that probably kept me sane, let's be fair. Not too sane, just sane enough. And it struck me that was a really important feature, but it also occurred to me, why do I see more sometimes and less others? Is this climate change? Is this the farmers' actions? How does that affect it? Can I actually think about it? And I realised that I couldn't. And in actual fact, for the last 15, or for the bulk of those 15 years, I realised I'd done nothing apart from say, oh, I've seen an otter. Look, here's a photograph of a bit of water that's got a ripple in it. I promise you it was an otter a second before. And it felt like that was very much a fleeting glance. My friends will appreciate I'm probably mad as a hatter, but they get used to me bringing the phone out and say, look, here's fungi, here's this, here's that. But I wanted to understand a bit more. And to be fair, if this thing works, oops, I had to stab it quite down. Oh, works too bad. There we go. In 2018, something changed for me. These were the two books that quite frankly changed my life. Now, I don't know whether any of you have read those books, but fundamentally those books summarise a clear history of habitat decline in rivers and farmland across the UK. And for me it was important both these books are interspersed and strengthened their message with hard facts and figures, data, evidence. And I realised then I had nothing more than this anecdotal evidence of what I'd seen. I couldn't tell you the ebbs and flows of habitats or species. I had no idea. I could look at my phone and work out what year I'd seen something, but I didn't understand how it was progressing. Was it getting better? Was it getting worse? I could guess, but some things, it was not enough information. I wanted to feel like I was doing something more. And those books became call to arms for me. So I decided I need to do something different, something that had action involved, but what? And that was the tricky thing, is what do you do? I can't knock on my farmer's door and tell him what I think of him. I have to live next to him. It's a very difficult position to take, but fundamentally I wanted to do something. Now in 2020 I was very lucky, and somebody offered me 15 acres of the land that I walk on every day. Now that 15 acres is about 800 metres of my walk, adjacent to the Brook. So that for me was walking out my back door and feeling like I owned part of the landscape. And that is a really lucky position to be in. I don't take that for granted, and it was an important one. And I did that because I thought I can take action, put action where my words had been before, and that was really important to me. So my 15 acres is floodplain, it's water meadow, it's overgrown culvert feeds the Brook, it floods, it blocks the road off. It's awful land as a farmer would consider it, but to me it's my back door, and it's really important. It's become my pet project. So when I first started I was very keen. I'd got the net farm model in the back of my head, I'd seen the woodland trust model. I thought I can rewild this, I can do something different. Now as I've progressed I realised that I need to really demonstrate something which is progressive but not maybe too far out there, because I do have a mortgage to pay. So my ideas have tended to blend, and we now see we've got an agroforestry project and a water management scheme going on. So I'm planting this year hedges, parkland trees, an orchard and ephemeral ponds to catch more floodland. But one of the things that I took from those books was I needed to have data. I needed to understand what action I was making. Was it good action? Was it bad action? Had I messed up something that was in a perfectly good position? And those of you who read the Net Farm book will appreciate this. It was an experiment. They let it go. But I didn't necessarily want to let it go. The consultant in me liked big data. It liked the analysis. It wanted to be able to do something more than just say, I think it works, I'm not sure. So In essence, I decided I wanted to measure and monitor, chart the progress what actions had, and refine whatever I did based on those hard facts and figures. So I started doing some research. I looked at all the measures I could find, Natural England's Biodiversity tool or Net Gain tool, the Woodland Trust carbon assessment. I looked at all sorts. Building with Nature, we looked at that one. Like bedtime reading, they were not. Okay? This is not for the faint-hearted to do this. They were the things that bored the pants off my kids as I tried to explain why I was reading a book this thick and looking at diagrams that meant nothing to me. And about that time, Cecilia turned up and asked for volunteers to measure the water health in the very stretch of the river that passed my land. This felt like a sign. She also offered cake. That may have had some influence in the process. It was very good cake. I would recommend that. There's nothing like an incentive. But the measurement process she offered was something that really appealed to me. Unlike lots of other measures that were assessments or empirical formula that created a number at the end, I could actually see this and see a recognisable benchmark that gave me a model of health and created this ever-growing database of hard facts and figures. And I felt that was really important, that I could be part of that process. Now, the training that we've received, you've heard of it, the 2 days we've had so far, and the work that's ongoing, has really expanded my knowledge of species. I cannot say that I can remember half of the things that are in the book. I cannot. I have a day job which fills my mind with facts and figures and ISO numbers. I can't remember all of it. But I've got a model and a mechanism that allows me to access that data and help. And it's also opened my eyes to a myriad of unseen life that was in the river that I'd walked past all these years. And that is a fantastic experience in itself. Now, as someone who's never volunteered for anything in their life, it's also been fascinating to really get on board with a group of people, like-minded people, who are fascinated with this. With a broad wealth of experience in other subjects, it becomes a social element in itself. So that's been a fascinating process to actually cross paths with so many other interesting people. But the process itself is not easy, and that's the one thing I would say. Cecilia's touched on this. It is hard. It's challenging. The kick sampling, that exotic first slide I had, that's the easiest bit. You know, it all goes downhill from there in terms of if you want the fun and giggles. It is hard after that. Staring down a microscope, sorting out the various bits and pieces, it's hard. It should probably have a health warning on it. I once spent 10 minutes staring at a caddisfly, trying to work out why it wasn't in any of the books, only to discover that the 2 gills that I was staring at were actually parasites and rubbed off. 10 minutes of my life I won't get back, but fascinating to realise what you don't know. It's mind expanding. And as I said, well, I am not David Attenborough. I probably never will be. I am somebody who's passionate about finding out what is around me, and this is an ideal tool for me. And to be fair, all the hard work makes it all the more satisfying when I do go, I know what this one is. I can put it down to a specific species. I can see, oh lovely, it's got anal prongs. Who knew they were a thing? But I do now. And if nothing else, what I discovered is that when you see interesting slides like this, in reality, it looks like that. It's bloody amazing. That's the kind of thing that keeps me interested. The things that live beneath the surface are fascinating. Now, for me, I feel that now is the time of ever greater pressures on habitats and wildlife. I try not to look at the news too much at the moment. It depresses me. But I am happy to volunteer my time, knowing that the data that we collect helps to monitor and track impacts and benefits and what the river health is from time to time as much part of a much wider initiative. So I hope that one day, hopefully very soon when we start the projects on our land, that the same health checks, health monitoring, will actually demonstrate that the actions that I've done have had a benefit, an impact, a positive one, I hope. And from my point of view, I hope that many people like me will look at this and use initiatives, whether they're directly or indirectly, to help to do things on their land if they own any, or just to help out generally, whether it's river clearances. This feels like a call to arms. A company I worked for many years ago had a quote which was cheesy to me at the time, but I liked it, and it was "Be the change." That really felt like it covered this message here. You need to do something if you want something better. So for volunteers like me, this is my chance to do something different to make a change. I know I've prattled on and done these various things. But thank you very much for listening today. Thank you.